Saturday morning, especially in my house, was kind of a magical time.
Saturday morning was clearly kids ruled the dial.
It was a big event. It was the weekly event. It was a special day.
However, it was a time fraught with certain dangers, because if I spent too much time watching TV, my father would come in and physically toss me from the room, loudly screaming,
"Go on, get some fresh air. What's the matter with you?" Watching cartoons all day.
It was cartoon prime time.
It was very, very special.
And I looked forward to it more than I did any other day of the week. It was fantastic.
Superheroes have always been part of the Saturday morning landscape, and as Batman is one of the most best-known superheroes, he was a prominent part of that.
It's the bat signal. Let's go.
At that time in the 70s, you had writers like Denny O'Neil and Steve Englehart really reinventing Batman as a darker, more driven detective character in the comics. But interestingly, on television, he had gone the exact opposite way.
It's finally happened, Robin. I've gone batty.
Batman, for me, has always been the idea that here's a guy who's kind of nuts, who has found a way to deal with the pain of his early life by saying what any kid would say. It's like, I've gone through hell, so I'm going to be a superhero. And he decides to be the biggest badass out there on the street. So off he goes in his car with his gadgets and beating up guys who are just as screwed up, if not more so, than he is. Batman is in his heart a kid's response to an injustice. So I think little kids like that.
One of the things that keeps Batman going, and Superman and Wonder Woman and now Spider-Man, is they have been allowed to evolve over the years.
By the mid-1950s, the superhero genre in general is having a lot of trouble in comics.
In the 50s, Batman became kind of the Eisenhower Batman, the Republican Chamber of Commerce Batman, who was Gotham City's leading citizen, and he would walk down the day-lit streets waving to his fans. And then in the 60s, he became a comedic character.
In '64, the book was doing fairly poorly. They decided to switch editors, gave it to a man named Julie Schwartz, who had driven a lot of the great superhero revivals of that period. Julie went back to it being detective stories. Within a couple of years, the development began on the Adam West Show. That quickly became such an enormous success that it really sparked the whole camp movement. Batman sales skyrocketed.
The TV show stumbled onto a way to take rather esoteric notion of camp and make it not only acceptable, but positive for a mass audience. And the comic books, seeing the popularity of the television show, I think in a half-hearted way tried to follow.
I love the fact that it was on TV. I just loved the fact that other people knew about Batman. He wasn't so secret anymore. And any version's better than no version.
That was a great cultural phenomenon. Really hit all of America. But like most cultural phenomena, burned fairly fast. So when it was done, what do we do now?
Julie Schwartz came to me after the TV show died and said, in effect, you're the flavor of the week, and what would you like to do with Batman? So when I did accept the Batman assignment from Julie Schwartz, it was with the condition that I would not do camp. What I thought I did was simply take the character back to what Bill Finger and Bob Kane started with. The loner, the obsessed guy, killed parents, figure of the shadows and the darkness. He is a very dark character. He is not a happy man.
I think that was paramount in Denny's mind, was the idea that underneath that batsuit was one of the most capable crime fighters in history, certainly in literary history, somebody who could go toe-to-toe with Sherlock Holmes as far as having a keen deductive mind.
He is the Dark Knight, dark, brooding character.
He's in the dark. He's much more of a detective. He's much more sort of anxiety-ridden and morose of a fellow.
Here you have a guy who looks evil and kind of exerts that pull, and yet at the end of the day, he's on your side. You may not like to hang out with him, but you'd sure as hell want him around if you were in any kind of trouble.
Fans love Denny O'Neil because he really understood the character and explored what made Batman Batman.
In '77, Filmation produced their new take on Batman, which at the time was a fairly child-friendly version of the character.
Time to stop this foolishness.
The New Adventures of Batman came at a time when there hadn't been a great deal of entertainment based on the property for some years. The last, of course, being the Batman series in the mid-'60s with Adam West and Burt Ward. Now we're 10 years later, there's been no new material, but yet there was a pent-up demand for the character. Lou Scheimer was able to sell a show based on the earlier series that would address the needs and the demand that was in the marketplace at the time in the mid-'70s.
At the time that Batman was on CBS, The New Adventures of Batman, he was also part of the Super Friends, which was on ABC by Hanna-Barbera. So in cartoon history, this is the first time that a character has been on two different shows on two different networks at the same year. And Batman was popular enough to be on both.
You know, one of the best elements visually of the Batman show was the title cards or the interstitial cards, because, you know, you'd be watching the episode and then they would go to an act break and there would be this great title card which would show Batman by himself standing up on top of a building with his cape swirling behind him, and as a kid I'd watch that and go, yeah, that looks good. Why aren't they doing that version of Batman?
The real purists like him looking like a vampire with tons of thought balloons because he has nobody to talk to, you know, wandering around these gothic castles and so forth, and that's a legitimate version of it too.
We used the lighter tone, obviously. I mean, the darker tone was just the whole concept of the character.
Look, the bat signal to the bat cave, Dick.
I think the attempt in New Adventures of Batman was to do a more stylized version of the sort of Bob Kane, Dick Sprang look of Batman from the 40s and 50s. I think one of the things that probably influenced the Filmation team was, what would Bob Kane do if he was animating his own characters?
Bob Kane, he came out once, but he had nothing really much to say about the show. It was odd. I thought he'd get much more involved, but I mean, I didn't know what he was, you know, what he was chewing. It was, I mean, he was very dark and gloomy. He could have been Batman.
The 1977 show, The New Adventures of Batman, reused the exact models that were used from the 1968-69 series, except for the commissioner who had been slightly redesigned for a new audience, and the Penguin, who no longer had his cigarette, which was, of course, not politically correct at the time. The rest of the characters, such as Mr. Freeze and Catwoman and Batgirl, were all the same design from the previous shows.
I will not fail.
Nor I.
Me neither.
I do not know the meaning of failure.
Excellent. Then I'll get you on your way.
The villains were not as villainy as they are in the live shows. And we were very cognizant of the fact that we had a young audience.
He wanted to get away from the violence. He thinks that if they were fighting, kids would imitate that. If Robin hit somebody, some kid would hit somebody. And that's not what Lou wanted.
As the voice of the Joker, I had fans coming to me say, why isn't he like in Killing Joke? You know, where he's homicidal, just wasting people left and right. And you're saying, standards and practices. I mean, you can't kill people on TV.
The Filmation Batman series was more a throwback to the 50s stories, which involved a lot of bizarre comical criminals, more science fiction elements, and more humor elements in the form of Batmite.
Hi, Batman.
Batmite, what are you doing there?
I'm ready to go with you and Robin. When do we leave?
This is serious business, Batmite.
You always say that.
Batmite was a character brought from the comic books from the Silver Age.
It's almost like the family pet because he's incorrigible and you can't control him. He's like a dog that's jumping all around the car and, you know, he means well, but he's going to get you into trouble.
Oh, Batmite we stuck in because we needed that. We always stick in a little character that you can laugh at. I think I did Batmite's voice. A little character that you could laugh at that I could do, so it was cheap.
What about me? I help too.
What would we do without you, little fella?
Olin Soleil and Casey Kasem were the original voices for the cartoon series in 68 through 69. And they were unavailable for the 77 series because they were under contract to Hanna-Barbera to do the voices of Batman and Robin over there. So it was lucky enough that they've got Burt Ward and Adam West to do the voices, which made the show that much more interesting and popular.
Greetings, Bat fans. This is Batman.
And Robin, the boy wonder.
It's interesting hearing Adam do it. He's really sly, minimalist in the live action where you can see him. But when he takes the same character and it's animated, he knows to, you know, kick it up a few notches. And he'd do it without a flicker of, you know, it's not Mel Brooks. It's so sincere. It's almost achingly funny when you realize, when you bring kind of a literal eye to it. That's what I love about it.
Electro's planning to take over the world, and he has the power to do it. We've got to stop him before it's too late. Batcomputer, can you help us locate that spaceship?
It will take some time, Batman.
Budgets were cut to the rock bottom, and in order to get any animation on the air, Filmation had developed a system by reusing a lot of stock footage.
The stock system, which Filmation had made part of their company, was a system of using animation over and over and over again to save the animators from having to animate it again.
Before they would start production on say an adventure show, the animators would sit down and draw the lead characters performing a bunch of stock movements.
We would do a scene, we would keep that scene, and we would reuse it in another section of the show.
You could just call up, you know, the stock department, and they would bring up a book, and you could just retrace that.
Well, obviously, there's severe limitation in the animation. They took almost like static comic book panels. The only thing that's moving is the mouth.
It would save them money because Filmation was the only studio that kept their work all here in this country. And they were very proud of that fact.
So Lou Scheimer has to be praised. You know, he was somebody who kept the doors open, and he kept animation in the United States as long as he could.
Because it should be here, because you have absolute control of what was coming out. You send that stuff overseas then, you never knew what was coming out. And I don't want to chastise any other people who did that.
But Penguin, you said we were gonna get rich.
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting rich. What went wrong was the way you went about it.
Yes, you learned a valuable lesson today. Never get involved with a dirty bird.
There's a group of fans who are too young to have watched the Camp Batman TV series when it was on, who tend to dismiss it as being wrong-headed and irrelevant to Batman. Those of us fans who were of a generation to enjoy it on TV, somehow it felt right even though it wasn't melodramatic, but it was camp. I think it's generally respected for its sort of place in history by most of the fan community. They don't want that in their comic books, but that was okay. That worked for that other media.
It's like there's the mythos that I'm familiar with, and here's one that's really aimed directly at getting kids interested in this material the easiest way we can, through comedy.
On the count of 3, Batgirl. 1.
Hey, then let me go with you.
too?
All right, but stay low.
You're telling a guy 2 foot tall to stay low? What else is there?
I think the importance of this show, when you look back at it, is its role as a link.
This was a way to reinvent him and make him fresh and new again for an audience that basically liked the character.
As the Batman editor, I frequently fielded complaints not only from fans, but from writers and artists that this is not the right Batman, meaning this is not the Batman I loved when I was 12. And Batman was hugely important. I had a rotten life, but Batman was an oasis for me. It's like Hamlet or like any of the classic characters. It's open to a lot of interpretations, and I think one of the reasons for the survival of Batman and Superman is they have been reinterpreted for every new generation.
For me, it has a particular nostalgic era. It connects me with my childhood. It connects me with my introduction to animation. They are iconic. They're a part of a library that was built lovingly over 25 or 30 years, and that really represented a part of the American culture at the time. And you can trace not only the evolution of the characters through the era, but also the evolution of American animation through that era. So from that perspective, it's significant for us to have these now available and to have them at our fingertips to watch.
Being a fan of the series, I can't say that I really enjoyed this Batman as much as I enjoyed the other Batman. This one seems a little bit more sugary, a little bit more sweet, a little bit softer.
Batman has always been a fun character, but he's also been a fairly, dark and in some cases violent character. The fantasy that you could be this kind of dark, brooding soul, put on a mask and go out and fight crime is very attractive. However, when you're showing it in a largely, kind of candy-colored world, the aura wears off fairly quickly.
But it was a huge success, and I think one of the few times when the success of a comic character in another medium actually helped the comic books.
Batman is an amazing template for various creators to test themselves on.
I've never met an artist who didn't want to draw Batman at least once.
Every creator who comes along takes Batman and puts their own stamp on him, while at the same time being respectful of what's gone before and using that as a way of propelling their own vision of the character and his world.
He's evolved over the years, the visual image has changed, the style has changed, but it's still very much on the same true line.
What always attracted me to Batman is the humanity. He is a hero by willpower and by taking a personal tragedy and turning it into something that's useful for the world.
They've made him into one of the most enduring characters and one of the most diverse characters as far as approach goes. They're, ultra-realistic depictions of him, and they're highly stylized, almost silhouette-like images of him. It's all up for grabs with Batman, and I don't think there's any version that's you could say is truly wrong.